So, do's and don'ts. The very first do, I'd say, which I think is true to everybody who really succeeds with thought leadership, whether it's individuals or whether it's big organisations, and it sounds very simple but very important, is to understand who your intended audience is. And I use the word audience rather than market. Who is listening to you and who will interact with you. So firstly, whether you're a lawyer in some market town somewhere or whether you're a big organisation like KPMG, spend time thinking about who the audience is, what they're thinking, and who they are, where they're going in their lives. Secondly, the other common trait in people who are successful with thought leadership, and we're talking here about people who've made fortunes, wealth beyond their dreams, is to engage the best minds, whether it's them as an individual or whether they're part of an organisation. Too often, leading law firms and accountancy firms and IT companies produce white papers or research reports in the body of their organisation. And the people who run the company or the partners are so busy, they don't engage with it. So you get the irony that the world's best thinking organisations produce bland, meaningless wallpaper as thought leadership. The very best thought leadership engages the very, very best brains in that organisation, whether they're identified subject matter experts or whether they're the leaders of the organisation. One of the other do's is perhaps surprising, and I thought about this a lot as I wrote the book. It seems that every individual or organisation that really succeeds with thought leadership makes their idea famous. Whether it's Total Quality Management or Michael Hammer with Business Process Reengineering, IBM with innovation, they make their idea famous. And I mean fame. I'm not talking about marketing or marketing communications, I mean fame. David Beckham sort of fame. So it involves publicity, it involves PR, it involves presentations, and it involves the most powerful communication method of all, word-to-word gossip. But one of the fundamental do's and success factors in thought leadership is to concentrate on making your idea famous. So what are the don'ts? If there are identifiable things that people who succeed with thought leadership do, what are the things you shouldn't do? What is it that makes thought leadership ineffective? Well, there are two or three things. The one I find most interesting, I called in the book cognitive bias. What I mean by that is people get a blinkered view. They can't see beyond certain parameters. Some people call this the mind of the market, and they point out that in an industry, different people who work in that industry, particularly senior people, develop a belief system. It has a history, a way of looking at things. So, for instance, the pharmaceutical industry believes in this thing they call the patent cliff, that you have to develop drugs that work for 10, 15 years, and as soon as the patent expires, then they become commodities. As a result of that, if somebody goes shopping on a Saturday morning, they might go and buy, let's say, an expensive branded good, a Gucci handbag for someone they love. In that market, those gifts are very expensive. You expect to pay more. In fact, you'd pay a lot for an antique watch. They might go around the corner to a store and buy a PC. In that market, the owners, the suppliers think that everything should be cheap. Customers are very demanding. And they might pop over to a pharmacy and collect a prescription drug where they have this patent cliff idea. Now, the beliefs in each of those three industries actually contradict, and yet both the suppliers in those industries and, interestingly, the customers when they're buying from those industries collude in those beliefs. And there's evidence that this cognitive bias stops people seeing powerful and relevant new ideas, and it's new entrants into those markets that shape them up with profound new ways of thinking. The second don't is going to surprise and probably shock a lot of people, but I'm more and more convinced of it, and that is you shouldn't think of this as a marketing tool. You shouldn't be too aggressive in marketing. Now, why would that shock people? Because there are thousands upon thousands of accountants, lawyers, consultants and others who see this as a way of generating fees. And there's no doubt that it draws in clients. It does attract people. And in parts of the world, in America and Australia, the phrase thought leadership marketing just slips off the tongue. However, there are a credible and very influential group of people, McKinsey, for example, and others, who think that thought leadership is nothing whatsoever to do with marketing. As I set out in the book, they don't like the word sales, they don't like the word marketing, they don't like the word PR. They see their thought leadership, all the reports and publications they make, as a way of giving back to society. Now, like many people, I was really cynical about that when I interviewed them. So I had meetings with 3 partners. I had follow-up meetings with people I know who were partners in McKinsey. I even took a couple of people out for a few drinks to see if they would, relax and drop the corporate guard for a while. But as far as I can tell, McKinsey is adamant that they have this democratization of ideas. They are interested in ideas for their own sake, and they do not see it as a way of deliberately marketing themselves. It is a way of demonstrating their expertise in dealing with concepts, but it's definitely not a way of drumming up business. And it does seem to be a problem if thought leadership is seen as a way deliberately of generating fees. The audience sees it as a debasement in the integrity of an idea. So there is a controversy around how much thought leadership is marketing. And one of the strong don'ts is to be too overt, too glitzy, too pushy in your marketing of thought leadership. A third don't is don't be too research driven. And again, that might surprise some people, but think of Henry Ford. He said if he'd asked his customers what they wanted, they'd have asked for faster horses, not a car. Recently, Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, said that he never really consulted customers, yet they had to see something in front of their eyes, to see the potential of an idea before they began to engage with it. And it's definitely a mistake simply to ask customers or consumers what they think of an idea, and to try to track new thought leadership ideas from what they believe and what they perceive. You need to, every example in the book of excellence in thought leadership emerges from the engagement of high quality specialists with consumer trends. So you cannot succeed with thought leadership by being too research driven.